guys, what's going on? Hello and welcome to the latest installment of Classic Film Flavors. I am joined by my co-host, Vanessa. How are you, Vanessa?
Hey, everyone. I'm good.
Episode 3. It's exciting.
It is. My God, I can't believe we're already on episode 3.
Feedback continues to be so supportive. The numbers are good. The feedback's good. The engagement, the discussion. Seems like people are really connecting with recommendations and giving recommendations of their own too. I know you, how many people have you turned on to 3 on a match via just the last like month or so, right?
I think countless. And now it's actually been announced that 3 on a Match, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's from 1933. It's a great example of a pre-code Hollywood film. It has been selected for the TCM Film Festival in April as one of their screenings. So, I mean, the classic film community online is thrilled about that film being screened at the festival. And yeah, amazing, amazing news, thrilling.
I would love to go to that and see that. Like one of these days I'll get out there, but could you imagine? You've never been to one, right?
I've never been to one of the TCM Film Fests. I've always wanted to go, but for me, someone who lives in Canada, it is very expensive to be able to do that. So you have to factor in flight and hotel and then the passes. So it's quite expensive. But one year, I swear I will go for sure.
Is there any sort of comparable thing in the Toronto area? I mean, there's a lot of film culture in that area. Is there any festivals that you can go to substitute?
There are, yeah. So in downtown Toronto, in the city proper, we have a few cinemas that date back to, I believe, the 20s and 30s that often screen classic films. So there's the Toronto Silent Film Festival that runs every year. That's one of the biggest ones. And there's also a classic film festival that happens every year in Port Hope, so outside of Toronto. So yeah, we have our own little festivals, but I mean, they don't compare in scope to the TCM one.
Right. Well, and being where they're at, because they're in Hollywood, right? Or
sure.
Just the location and I want to do some of these noir festivals at some point. Like
for sure.
Down in Key Largo and maybe like San Francisco. I mean, these are so much history. Because for me, we don't have access to a lot of that stuff here. I'm in Alabama for those watching this video, and there's just no classic film culture here at all. None to speak of.
So you guys don't even have like your own local cinemas that may screen older films periodically? You don't have that?
There is something called Sidewalk Film Festival that doesn't really do a lot of classic film. It's eclectic, but it's not the kind of stuff that I'm going to get it. No, someone's going to see this from that festival. They're going to be like, you son of a, but it's not the same thing. It's not like, days of pre-60s movies. It's some new stuff in there. I think they might have even did the Sparks Brothers this past festival. So it's a real mix. So no, there's nothing for the stuff that we talk about. No.
Okay. All right. Well, one day we'll get to TCM Film Festival.
We sure
for
will.
Sure. One day.
We're gonna roll up on that like ballers, be like, we're here, get out of the limo, like champagne, like yeah.
We'll have to film an episode of Classic Film Flavors on location at the TCM Film Fest.
That's what I'm talking about. On location. Yeah. Yes. Where do we want to start with the Orson Welles thing? Is that you want to start?
Yes. Tell me all about it.
I just finished My Lunches with Orson. This is not new. This book came out, I think, in 2013. So I know a lot of people have read this already, but I just caught up with it because there's a lot of stuff out there, you guys. It's really hard to stay current on new books. But I love Orson Welles. I'm kind of I'll try to keep this shorter. Like a lot of people hear that Citizen Kane is one of the greatest movies ever, and they come to Citizen Kane and they're like, I think I may have had that reaction, and then exploring further Welles over the next 25 years, however long it's been, I've developed a real appreciation for not just what he accomplished, but for the flaws, the contrasts, right? And so this book is a chronicle of Orson Welles. So Director Henry, I think it's Jeglom. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but it's Jaglom. You would know his work. He's been directing for 50 years. But in the 80s, he would go to lunch with Orson Welles like once a week at the restaurant Ma Maison and would record. And Orson Welles was like, you can record it, but I don't want to see it. Keep it in your bag because I don't want to be. And so you get candid. He's not. Well, the question is he performing? And maybe a little, how when you talk to somebody, you kind of bend your conversation a little bit towards their way of thinking, perhaps. Like you might, like if they like something, it seems sometimes like he's playing a little bit to Henry, but it is incredibly candid. And he hates everything, or he seems to hate everything. It's like everybody you can think of. Jack Lemmon is looking old. So Henry's like, I talked to Peter Bogdanovich on the phone last night. He's like, let me guess. He wanted to talk about Peter Bogdanovich. All he wants to talk about is himself. It's like, he hated, it was just it's so catty.
Wow.
And he's telling stories about who slept with who. He's like, oh, Katharine Hepburn slept with everybody. She slept, and she wasn't secret about it either. She'd tell you she was doing it in the cars and in the trailers. And she's like, he goes like, Carol Lombard, she kept it on the down low. Garbo kept it on the down low, but Katharine Hepburn would tell everybody. It's like, yeah. Also coming out through this is just you see the insecurity, you see the, I think they said at the time of his death, he had 19 projects that he had started and abandoned. And he was notorious for walking away from projects. Mm-hmm. And you see behind the scenes, like he was just so insecure about everything. There's a scene, it's a transcript of these conversations, right? So it's literally a transcript that Peter Biskind, the great writer of, he did Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. That's what he did. And he did Down and Dirty Pictures, the Miramax Chronicle. Great, one of the great historians of this kind of thing. He's compiled everything, but there's a conversation where the head of HBO comes and sits at the table, and he's like, I have an idea for you. And she's like, tell me about it. And he's like, well, it takes place in this island, this Caribbean island. She's like, what about the Dominican Republic? And he's like, no, that's all wrong. When you said Dominican Republic, I saw your eyes. I saw the light in your eyes die. And she's like, no, I want to hear about it. He's like, no, I won't tell you. And she's like, no, seriously, tell me about. And he's like, no, and you just see like the self-sabotage that he was doing. Like, no wonder, right? But it forms this picture of a study in contrast, and you have to love him. I mean, I think at the end of the book, you just love him because he's so human. He's so, I mean, like you see,
he's so flawed.
So flawed. That's what, people, just to make it's not a one-to-one comparison, but a lot of people talk about George Lucas and like the prequels and but those movies are so flawed. That's why I like them, because I can see the flaws of that human creator. I find that approachable. And so with Orson Welles, he's deified for Citizen Kane, but then he's like, he's like, I put comedy in Citizen Kane. There's camp that I put into Citizen Kane to undercut. He's like, Xanadu it's kind of a joke. And I was like, oh, we take all this stuff so seriously sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then just to see all there's so much wisdom, but then also casual racism and he was massively overweight at this time in his life. He was smoking like a chimney. He would order like a salad at lunch and then go to his hotel room or his home or whatever and have he would order like 4 steaks and 7 baked potatoes, but he would do it behind closed doors. Wow. So you see this like very self-destructive behavior. But I got to tell you, the way there's an epilogue, and it was written by Henry the day after Orson Welles died. And to have that contemporary record of that loss as it had meant to him, because he'd been having lunch with him for about 3 years every week, is heartbreaking. And for him to have the wherewithal in that time of loss to say, I'm going to write an epilogue to this, I'm going to write my ending, because he's a filmmaker, right? So I guess he's already, This is how he's thinking. But we have such closure to this because he had the wherewithal the day after Orson Welles died to write his epilogue to that relationship, to say goodbye. And it's powerful. And I'm getting emotional just talking about it, but it's a wonderful book. It's great. So if anybody hasn't read this and you want to know more, Orson Welles is a daunting figure. He's an intimidating figure, rightfully so, but he was also very approachable in his, he did commercials for liquor and, all kinds of stuff. He's in the Transformers, the movie, the animated Transformers movie. He did whatever he could to pay the bills, to bring money in. It's a wonderful book, and it's got so much gossip in it and so much dirt, but you're not mad about it. It doesn't feel dirty, but it's just like, well, he hated everything. He really had nothing kind to say about most things, but maybe he did behind closed doors. I don't know.
I think, what, I don't know an awful lot about Orson Welles. Obviously, I know of his films, but him as a person, I'm not very familiar with. But I will say that having now heard your summary or review of the book and what I know of his films, he seems to be a very layered human being. Like there's a lot of layers to him. Just like there's a lot of layers to his films, like Citizen Kane and the Magnificent Ambersons. There's so many layers there. And I guess I'm wondering now if he intentionally did that with his films and knowing how he was as a person. It's fascinating, very, very fascinating. And it now listening to you describe that book, it makes me want to learn more about him.
I think you should read it. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a very quick read.
Okay.
It's probably like a 6-hour read. Oh, he hated it. John Huston, Charlie Chaplin. He thought John Ford was like all these guys are hacks. All these. He would tell us that this series that we're doing is pointless. We are worshiping film, and that instead of watching all these movies, we should be out living life and then turning those life experiences into our own movies. That to worship the art before life experience is to have completely missed the point. And can you really argue with that? Like that's you understand where he's coming from.
I do. Yeah, I do. Goodness gracious.
Great.
Okay. Should we just stop recording now then?
I went too long. I'm sorry. I talked too long about it. There's so much to say.
Well, I mean, it's Orson Welles.
Yeah.
We could be here forever.
That's right. So, okay, you go. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so this is like the polar opposite of Orson Welles, but I think the highlight of my month, so the month of February, the highlight has been Girl Shy from 1924, starring Harold Lloyd and Jabina Ralston. Guys, what a brilliant film. It's only like an hour and 27 minutes, very short. And I think when you mention Harold Lloyd, people automatically think of Safety Last, which is the silent film where he's hanging from the arms of a big clock on the outside of a building. That's the iconic image of Harold Lloyd on film. And everyone says, oh, that's his masterpiece. You know what? I'm going to state it here and now. Girl Shy is a better film, at least in my opinion. Yes, I love Safety Last, but Girl Shy is one of those films that really takes you by the seat of your pants, and you will find yourself laughing uproariously out loud, screaming at the TV screen, and just the final 20 minutes is a roller coaster ride. So to put it in a nutshell, what this film is about, Harold Lloyd plays his famous glasses character. So he's wearing the circular glasses that he was most well known for. And he's the type of man that cannot speak to women. He stutters, he's shy around them. He just can't speak to women. So what he does is he publishes or he writes a book on how to seduce women. Like he's living his fantasy through what he's writing. And surprisingly, he gets his book published, and then all of a sudden these women are reading his book and they're falling for him. So they're all around him now, and he literally can't speak to them because all he does is stutter. But he meets this one girl played beautifully by Jabina Ralston, and the two of them fall in love. And the final 20 minutes of the film, I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say he's working against time to get the woman he loves out of a very sticky situation. And in those final 20 minutes, this guy, to this day, I don't know how he filmed those sequences. So he has to race against time to get to this woman he loves. And during that race, he's on like 12 different types of vehicles. So he's on a bus, he's on a tram, he's in a car, there's a chicken involved. Like, it's just manic. I don't know how they filmed this, but the guy is a genius. And yeah, this was easily the highlight of my whole month. Girl Shy, go watch it.
It sounds like a good premise for a modern movie too. I can see a modern, like,
it's like a romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And I've read online that people consider it, so film historians consider it the very beginnings of the rom-com genre. So yeah. Brilliant.
I feel like that's the plot of something coming to Peacock later this month. It's like, Harold Lloyd has no luck with women, but that didn't stop him from writing the book.
No, it was a joy to watch, an absolute joy. It put a smile on my face, and it really, I after we finished recording, I really want to watch it again. It was that good. It was fantastic.
Wow. Let me ask you a question. There are going to be people who are watching this now. We've talked in the past about the barrier for older movies. There are people that think, the It's a Wonderful Life thing, and the girl that was like, it's old, y'all, it's black and white. What do you think? Like, how would you get people into silent film? Because that's a big one. That's like, people think that they're going to come to this stuff and it's going to be like a college course or something like that. Yeah. Just jump in. Just pick a good one and jump in.
You know what? Okay, before I make a suggestion, I want everyone to know that I only started watching silent films in my early 30s. So maybe about 8-9 years ago. I never watched silent film prior to that because, to me, I always considered it quite intimidating, and that it would require too much of my focus and attention, because not only are you watching what's happening on screen, but you're also reading the intertitles. So you really have to pay attention. Now, having said that, and going through almost a decade of avidly watching silent films, I would say for someone who would like to discover them for themselves now, maybe pick a comedy. Don't pick something that's heavy. Like, don't go into silent films wanting to watch The Big Parade or The Passion of Joan of Arc. Pick maybe something from Harold Lloyd or Chaplin or Keaton or some of the earlier Laurel and Hardy films, just to give you some kind of introduction to silent film, because there's not a whole lot of dialogue in those films in the form of intertitles. Most of the action is comedic action. So you're watching things happen. So if you look away from the screen, chances are you probably won't miss much, or you won't miss any intertitles that are, needed to understand what's happening in the story. So yeah, I would definitely pick a comedy. And that worked really well for my two young nephews. The first silent film that they watched was The General with Buster Keaton, and they absolutely loved it because they could sit there, they could enjoy it, they were laughing, there wasn't a lot of reading that they had to do, and it's just a total wonderland in terms of film content.
I think it's kind of an acquired taste, which is what you're saying.
Sure.
Like, you started watching this in the last, less than 10 years or so. And for me as well, I didn't start really getting into older movies until I was about, they were always around in the background. Long story short, it was really, I was like 30, and I was like, I really want to explore more of this, be able to have a conversation about older movies. And I don't mean 1965. I mean like 1932. it's an acquired taste. It's like whiskey. You don't immediately come to whiskey, you know, you may get there down the road. So yeah, it can be intimidating. And I want to just second what you said. So come with the, go with the comedies, go with the things that are approachable. Horror, I would say horror is a good one too.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is one that comes to mind, and maybe even Metropolis or something like that. Although that's kind of daunting too. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a long one. I wouldn't begin with Metropolis, although you could. I mean, that's a masterpiece, but maybe not for someone who's just getting into silent films.
Like, how ambitious are you?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, when you're talking about like Chaplin and Buster Keaton, Orson Welles would say that Chaplin was not that great, but Buster Keaton was where it was at. So
I've heard, you know what, to Welles's credit, I've heard from other sources, and I've read a lot of material saying that Chaplin wasn't the greatest human being, although he was a formidable performer and director and writer and composer as well. As a human being, he had his issues. But you know what? Everyone does. We're all human, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
His criticisms about Chaplin were the work. He didn't think he was funny. He didn't think he was talented.
Okay.
He thought he was precious about the material, in addition to his tendency towards young women, young girls. But here's an observation about Chaplin from Orson Welles that I just read. He believed that his key to success was that he had taken the tradition of the European clown, that the French clown that was very artistic with the short pants, and the dramatic clown with the baggy pants American laughing clown, and married them together. And I was like, you know what? That's a pretty good observation from Orson Welles about Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, no, it is.
Clowns.
Yeah, I think it's an accurate description of what he did, but also keep in mind that he was the only one who came up with that idea, and he's the only one that proved to be a great success because of his idea.
Yeah.
So I don't think that Orson Welles was correct in wanting to diminish what Chaplin accomplished because he took influences and married them together, because he was an enormous success at doing that, and all the power to him. I mean, look what the man accomplished.
I don't agree. I disagree with about 80% of what Orson Welles says in this book. And I'm like, do you really? Maybe he believed it that day at that moment, but then sometimes I think he's just messing with Henry. But I disagreed with so much of what came out of his mouth. And everybody that we revere, Hitchcock, hack. But he has a point too, because he's like, Hitchcock made all these wonderful movies in England, and then comes to America, and it's like he turned his back on everything that he'd been and just started making commercial crap just for the mass audiences. And like, that's a minimalist way of looking at it, but it is essentially true for what happened. Like, Hitchcock found this thing, like he was this great auteur, and then he comes and he's like, I saw Rear Window on the television the other night. What Jimmy Stewart's worst performance, one of Hitchcock's worst movies. It was like, we revere these things now, right? But it's great. You just have to be like, wow, that's so Orson.
Hey, it's you know what? It's one person's opinion, and my favorite movie will not be someone else's favorite movie. We all have different opinions, and that's okay.
I was telling you about it. I was like, it's like Twitter. I think Orson Welles is like Twitter.
Can you imagine him on Twitter?
Yeah, like, saw so-and-so crap. Jeez. Do you want to talk about Gold Diggers a little bit? Gold Diggers of 1933.
Let's do it.
So I have a review for this at CerealAtMidnite.com right now. I love this movie. We talked about this movie where did we talk about this? I think it was our pre-code video.
It was, yeah.
My goodness, it's just Hollywood magic. Orson Welles probably didn't like that either, but it's so magical. And it's for people that might be watching this video that haven't seen this movie, or you're like, it's a musical and there's dancing and there's singing, and that's not for me, man. I don't know. There's something really special about these worlds that were created and that only exist on screen. Here's a movie that was made during the Depression, kind of the height of the Depression. but it's saying we're in the money, you know, we got good times coming, and it's joyful and it's optimistic and it's a pre-code. So it's playfully naughty in a way that we would never, like, it's about a year before the production code really cracked down. And so as far as these movies, it's the only one, the Gold Diggers series, it's the only one that has that, the teeth. But I mean, there's so much to praise, right? And I've written the review, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But I mean, we got Joan Blondell, who you and I both love. We've got Busby Berkeley, who is an institution for a particular thing that he did. It was so, how do you talk about Busby Berkeley in words? You just have to see it, you know?
Yeah, you got, that's a perfect way to put it. Rather than speaking about it, just watch it. I mean, Gold Diggers of 1933, that was probably the best example of a Warner Brothers backstage musical of the pre-code period. Another honorable mention should be 42nd Street. Busby Berkeley had just an extraordinary talent for evoking visual magic. It's like, how did it make watching the musical sequences in these films, in particular Gold Diggers of 1933, you're almost sitting there thinking, how in the hell was this filmed in the early 30s? How did this happen? It's almost unbelievable what you're watching. You think, okay, maybe like there's some CGI or some animation. No.
Yeah.
This was all done live in front of a camera. It's incredible.
Yeah. We tend to think as a society that we have discovered everything and that we are the pinnacle of, you know, well, that I see so many people that have this superior attitude, even about movies from the 70s or the 80s now. And the idea that 30s movies could be revolutionary or could hold their own, but they do more than hold their own. These Berkeley musical numbers are, you know, they're like, it's like human kaleidoscopes. It's this psychedelic kaleidoscopic, you know, shot from straight, well, they've shot in several different ways, but especially, you know, you get like a camera looking straight down and then the flawless choreography of what's going on beneath you. And I don't know how many takes, you know, there's a scene with these like neon violins that these girls are playing. And I heard that, or I read that they would get electrocuted from the wires and stuff, but you don't stop that take. You keep going. So you have to imagine all these little shocks, but the show goes on. You know what I mean? It's like the fact that human beings did this without computers, without, it's just all analog, camera, film, and hard work. And we're never going to see anything like that again. I can't imagine we'll ever see anything like that again.
And if we do, it'll probably be enhanced by like computer visuals. It would never be just people on a soundstage reenacting these movements and creating these kaleidoscopic images. It would probably be all superficial, done in post-production on a computer.
That's a good lead into something else I wanted to talk about. Do you mind if I just do a brief?
Go ahead.
I just want to talk briefly. So I should say Gold Diggers 1933, brand new from Warner Archive. I just got it, just reviewed it. And in the same wave, this is the February release wave, also the Three Musketeers, the 1948 Three Musketeers with Lana Turner and Gene Kelly. And there's a scene, there's a sword fight. First of all, it's a wonderful movie. It's a little long, but it's a wonderful movie. And there's a scene where there's this sword fight. There's this big action set piece that takes place on the beach. And they start like on the rocks above the beach. And then the fight takes them down into the sand. And then Gene Kelly and this bad guy ends up on rocks that are in the water as the waves are like behind them splashing. And this is all completely analog. Like they're there doing this. Nowadays, you know, we got Fast and Furious movies where they're, you know, riding submarines and stuff like that. But the power of watching someone who is feet from crashing waves and you just see the massive ocean behind them, sword fighting, staying on the, I mean, it's physically impressive. I really feel like we've lost something. And I don't want this series to be like, old man yells at clouds, or like in my day, because frankly, we're not that old. But there is something that is so powerful about these movies that we have lost connection with. Maybe it's just natural progression, right? We have technology. You don't have to put somebody out in the waves now. We can do it on a computer. But there's something about seeing that. Something about seeing Evel Knievel try to jump the Grand Canyon, right? These are things that it's that human achievement. You always connect with something that is real. Yeah. And it's power. It's when movies are really operating on peak levels, as these two are, there is a power that is just overwhelming. I say, like, it's kind of a joke because I don't know how else to say it, but I go like, I'm watching cinema right now. Like, it's just like cinema,
Yeah. No, it's right. And there's also, I think, one of the things that turns me on most about watching these films and all the stunt work and all the preparation that must have gone into the filming of particular scenes is there must have been a real element of danger there, because I mean, at any point, anything could have gone wrong. And this goes right back to the silent comedies that Keaton, Lloyd, Chaplin, and Laurel and Hardy were doing. There's danger there. There's a real element of danger. And I think that, well, for me, I know that that's one of the attractions I have of watching silent film. I'm attracted to that element of danger. And I want to know how that sequence was filmed and what was going on behind the scenes and how many hours of preparation went into Busby Berkeley's choreographic movements. It's astounding what these people accomplished back then. Astounding.
And in an era of green screen, which again, we were headed that way. Somebody was, when that Call of the Wild movie with Harrison Ford came out, people were like, the dog looks CG. Why not a real? I'm like, you can't have a real dog for that story and do justice to the material. Of course it's a CGI dog. You're not going to throw a dog into a waterfall or something. Like, you're not going to do that in 2020, whatever year that was. It's a natural progression of our technology and where we're at as a society, but we have absolutely lost that visceral connection with the human element of what we're watching on screen. And now we go see movies and it's superheroes and it's, and I love those. I love seeing those, not all of them, but I love a lot of them. But we've lost the very real, very tangible connection with what we're seeing on screen. It's become a more passive spectator experience, whereas it used to be a very personal, engaged experience.
Yes, 100%.
That's what we do. That's why we're doing this in the first place. So
yeah.
What's back to you? What you got next?
Okay, so the last title I want to talk about is actually a little known gem that has just been rediscovered. So if some of you don't know who he is, his name is Ben Modell, and he is a film historian. He's a silent film expert, in my opinion, and he is a silent film accompanist. So he composes and plays music on pianos and organs while screening silent films. So he has a company called Undercrank Productions, and periodically throughout the year, him and his company and the companies he works with will lovingly restore silent films that have been long forgotten. So one of their most recent releases on Undercrank Productions was Xander the Great from, I believe it's 1925, starring one of my favorites, Marion Davies and Harrison Ford. Not that Harrison Ford, obviously.
Old. Wow.
So Marion Davies and Harrison Ford did a number of films together, and I believe this was the second film that they worked on. So Xander the Great is essentially about a young woman who lived in an orphanage, and she's played by Marion Davies. Her name is Mamie. So she grows up in an orphanage and she is physically abused at this orphanage. So she is kindly adopted by an older woman who has a young son of her own. So Mamie comes into this family where she's got now a younger brother. His name is Alexander, and Mamie names him Xander. So that's Xander and Xander the Great. And then tragically, the adoptive mother dies. So because Xander is so young, I think he's probably about maybe 6 years old in the film, the orphanage that Mamie used to stay at and be physically abused by is going to come and take Xander away because he couldn't possibly continue living with Mamie and without his mother. So in order to escape the clutches of the orphanage, Mamie takes Xander with her and they go on this journey together, and then chaos ensues. But you know what? It's not been seen in decades, this film. I had never even heard about it until I saw that Ben Modell was releasing it through his label. And they did a 2K restoration of the original 35 millimeter negative, and it looks amazing. So at the beginning of the film, when Marion Davies is playing this girl in the orphanage, obviously she has no makeup on. You could literally see every single freckle on Marion Davies' face, on her arms. And I found that not only beautiful, but oh my, like what a revelation, because you're so used to seeing these on-screen personalities of that era just caked in makeup, because the studio lights were so strong and they didn't want their facial features to disappear on camera. So they used to wear a lot of makeup, but she wasn't wearing any. And it's just the fact that you can now see every freckle on her body was amazing. It took my breath away. And the film itself was a real joy. It's absolutely brilliant. And please, if you want to support Ben and Undercrank Productions and the work that he does for these silent films that have virtually disappeared, please purchase from his label, because like he said in so many of his videos, you're voting with your wallets. If you want this stuff to stick around, and if you're passionate about these silent films, please purchase a copy of it. I mean, it's a wonderful film. You won't be disappointed, and you're helping preserve future silent films. You're giving your money to the companies who lovingly restore them.
Yeah. Supporting what you care about is huge, and it's something we talk about all the time. And I'm going to go as far as to say, for what you're talking about, if that's something that interests you, maybe you don't buy the latest Spider-Man movie when it comes out on 4K, because that's always going to be there. This needs your support right now. So I don't know. I don't ever want to be preachy about these things, but I see so many people that are, we're all doing our best, but we are literally supporting these products with our dollars. And they, I have the great privilege to know some of the label heads and some of the people responsible for some of these releases, and every single purchase matters. Every single purchase is a big deal. Yeah. I like the way you were talking about the restoration too. When things are cleaner and you can see, like it removes a barrier, right? It removes that sense of distance, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. It takes away the legend and the myth behind these incredible on-screen pioneers, and it makes them seem so much more human. And I can't even properly describe what was going through my mind when I saw the freckles on her face. It was just surreal, because again, we're used to seeing these film history legends without any barriers, without the makeup on. And I don't know, to me, that felt incredible seeing that.
Yeah. I'm going to tie my last one into that. It's another restoration that just came out from the good folks at Flicker Alley. Repeat performance it's his return of the lost noir classic. And I'll tell you one of the things. So it's a 1947 movie. It has just been given this lavish restoration by UCLA Film and Television Archive and the Packard Humanities Institute, and it looks so incredibly good. And I'll do a proper review for this at the CerealAtMidnite.com website. So I'm not gonna get into the minutia of the movie, it's kind of a supernatural noir, which there's not a whole lot of. It makes a good companion piece to Night Has a Thousand Eyes, which there's a review for that at CerealAtMidnite.com. Eddie G. Robinson as sort of a psychic. He can see the future, but can he change it? That's the question. Good companion piece to that. But what I love about this release, so it is loaded with some bonuses. So we've got the Blu-ray and the DVD. There's this, so it's based on a book. The book is, you can buy the book now. It's still in print, physically or digitally. And so they kind of compare the movie to the book and the changes therein. But there's an introduction by author, film historian, and noircologist Eddie Muller. Eddie Muller is one of the authorities on film noir. And he said something that I really liked in his introduction. He says great. His journey with this movie began about 16 years ago when he tried to find a print to show at one of the noir festivals. And they got the film and he'd never seen it. And then they tried to show the film and it was so degraded that they actually could not project it. So then the journey for restoration begins. And now here we are all these years later, and we have a finally it's restored, which is huge. People like, it doesn't just appear. It takes so many hours, so many thousands of dollars, so much donation from people. This is people's life work. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into this. But he said something that I really appreciated. He's talking about, he said, this is the return of a lost classic noir. He's like, there are going to be people who watch this that are going to have objections for all of that. Is it a noir? Maybe it has elements of the noir. Is it a classic? Well, it's been obscure for a long time, so who can say? But at least now you can see it and you can make up your own mind. And that was huge because there's so much gatekeeping in the noir and just in general of what we're talking about in our series here. There's so much gatekeeping about, that's not noir, or it could be horror. That's not horror. So many people want to protect the walls, protect the borders. And I love the idea of like, hey, you decide if this is noir, you decide if this is a classic. And that is much appreciated. That's where I'm going with that. It's just like, that's uncommon. And every time I talk about a noir, somebody's like, that's not noir. I'm like, well, here's why I think it might be. There's a profile on the actress Joan Leslie, who is, first of all, she's gorgeous in this movie. And she's really good in it as well. This is amazing. There's a documentary that's like 36 minutes long on the history of the Eagle Lion production company, which was a Poverty Row production company that put out some Anthony Mann, John Alton noirs around the same time. And Alan K. Rhodey is the guy that's he's the guy for the documentary that's telling the story. And I have such respect for Alan K. Rhodey because he's really one of the leading, scholars for noir history, not just noir, just this era of movie history. And he goes into the archives and like takes the books down, takes the newspaper archives down, and like really sits for hours and researches this stuff. And we're in an era where people are just looking up trivia on IMDb, and that's what goes into their commentaries and stuff. Here's a guy that's going into universities and, film labs and film libraries, I believe he goes into studios, libraries, and really just looks at the materials. That is amazing. That is scholarship that we should be so grateful for. And I am. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Alan K. Rhodey is one of my favorite film historians and authors. He's a wonderful man. And you know what? He's so approachable as well. So you can find him on Facebook and Twitter. And I mean, anytime I've ever had a question for him, he gets back to you right away. And you could tell that he's thrilled to share his information with all of us. He's just brilliant. I absolutely love the man. He's awesome.
Isn't that wonderful? Just the idea of having the knowledge and wanting to share the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's so you wish everybody would be that way, and not everyone is. And so it's so much appreciated when, teachers can teach without putting that barrier up. I love communities and subcultures and fandoms that open the doors and say, come in, you are welcome. And And so this is a good gateway for that. So I'll leave it there. Watch for, maybe the review's already up by the time this video goes up, but I'll be writing in the next few days. But the disc just blew me away. It feels essential. It really does.
Yeah, I think Flicker Alley does a wonderful job too of presenting their restorations and the films that they release. They're wonderful. They do an absolutely terrific job of presenting these films. Many of them I had never heard of until they were actually released. Like, for instance, the one that you just discussed, I had never heard of that film until I found out that Flicker Alley was releasing it. So they're really putting the work in, and they're getting the word out on these maybe underrated film gems. And I think it's wonderful when I hear people talking about them now, because essentially these films had disappeared for decades and now there's a resurgence around them. And I think that's awesome.
Are you still working your way through that Poverty Roast set that they put out a few months back?
Yeah, Flicker Alley is one of my favorite boutique label. Yeah, boutique labels. They're one of my favorites. They do incredible work, and their presentations are always A+.
I have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah, really, totally.
It's educational, but it doesn't feel
burdensome. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good place to leave this one. We went longer than we planned on, but my goodness, we had a lot to talk about, didn't we?
Yeah, we said, oh, let's make a 20-minute video. Yeah, no.
I don't know if we
okay.
can. Like half of it's me talking about Orson Welles, but that's okay. I was excited about it. Well, tell people, since the last episode, since Classic Film Flavors episode 2, you have launched a Patreon page. Tell people about what you're doing and how they can get involved with everything that you like. So many people come to these videos and they're like, Heath was okay, Vanessa was amazing. So people love your perspective, they love your take, and now they can get even more of it. Go.
Goodness gracious. Okay, so yes, I launched a Patreon. I think it was in late January. And honestly, it's just, to me, it's more of an experiment than anything. I wanted to obviously try something new. I do work full-time right now, but it's not something that I can see myself continuing to do for the rest of my life, because my real passion lies in classic film. It always has. I've been watching classic film since I was a young child of 6 years old. So my love and admiration for these films has carried on for over 30 years. So that's over 3 decades of my life devoted to one thing, and one thing in particular. So I want to share my love of classic film with others, and I want them to share their knowledge of classic film with me as well. Essentially, I just want to create a community where I can teach and talk about classic film with others who have a common interest in it, and maybe others that are just discovering the world of classic film for the first time and would like maybe my insight or feedback or recommendations. I'm happy to do that for people. And yeah, so I thought I would try a Patreon, see how it goes. And so far it's been absolutely wonderful.
That's great. Yeah. And I'm going to throw myself in there too, because you guys are watching two people who are trying to turn their passion into careers. I took the leap to full-time content. I'm not just a YouTuber. I spend a lot of time on the site as well, but you took the leap last year trying to turn this. I'm not trying, I'm doing it, turning my career, my passion into a career. Vanessa's trying to do the same thing. We live on support. We live on the community. We would appreciate however you can get involved and contribute to that. And we have such value and genuine appreciation for everybody that is helping us to do that. And I know you have gotten you're doing, one-on-one calls, you're doing handwritten letters for people. It is a very personal, it's very serious, because we know that there are other Patreon things out there and they don't deliver, right? There's a lot of them that just don't deliver, but I think both of us take it very seriously. And this is a stepping stone. This is a way to make our passion a reality right now. So if you believe in the stuff that we're talking about, we really would, both of us would appreciate support. But go check out, I'm going to put links to your Patreon information in the description of this video. I'll probably pin a comment too, so people can just click right through. Tell them where they can find you online on Twitter, because you are so beloved on Twitter as well.
Yeah, if anywhere, I'm most active on Twitter. So you can find me at Vanessa Butino on Twitter. And please come and say hello. I can't tell you how many people in Heath's audience have followed me on Twitter and messaged me. And it's always a joy to talk to you guys about classic film on there. And yeah, you guys have really become my friends, and it's wonderful. Thank you.
That's great. All right, so we'll wrap this one up. Hey, let's continue the conversation. We talked about a lot of stuff here. What are some of your favorites, some of your discoveries since our last episode? Any recommendations, topic recommendations? Let us know. We'd love to hear about it. And hey guys, don't be a stranger. Continue that conversation with us, and we will celebrate this stuff without irony and with genuine love, because there is nothing else like it. It is just the best. Vanessa, this was great. Thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome. I can't wait to record the next episode.
Let's do it right now. Let's end this one. Guys, thank you. So stay tuned. Until next time, we will catch you later.
Bye.